Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defender and stared at the message that had just arrived. The blue hologram flickered in front of him, showing symbols he had never seen before. His hands shook slightly as he read the translation that appeared below the alien text. The Galactic Council of Eternity was calling him to their homeworld. Captain Lisa Santos walked up behind him and looked at the message. Her dark eyes went wide with surprise. She had served with Jake for 8 years and had never seen anything like this. No human had ever been invited to meet the Council. Most people thought they were just stories told by other alien races. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Lisa said quietly. She touched the hologram controls and read the message again. The symbols were real and the translation was clear. The Council wanted Jake to come to their world called Valthera Prime within 30 days. Jake turned to face his crew. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Everyone was watching him and waiting for orders. He had been in command of deep space missions for 12 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Dr. Kevin Parker came running onto the bridge with a data pad in his hands. The tall scientist was breathing hard and his gray hair was messy. He had been studying alien cultures for most of his life and knew more about other species than anyone else on the ship. "Commander, I just finished checking our databases," Kevin said. His voice was excited but also worried. "The Council of Eternity is real. They have been ruling the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Some records say they are much older than that." Lisa looked at the data pad over Kevin's shoulder. The information was limited but frightening. The Council was made up of ancient alien species that most younger races had never seen. They lived on a world that existed partly outside normal space and time. Their technology was beyond anything humans could understand. "Why would they want to meet with us?" Jake asked. He knew the answer would not be good news. Humans had been exploring space for only 300 years. They were still considered a young and primitive species by most aliens. Kevin scrolled through more data on his pad. His face became more serious as he read. "Our quantum tunneling research," he said slowly, "and our work with time mechanics. The reports say the Council considers these technologies to be forbidden." The bridge became even quieter. Everyone knew about the breakthrough research being done on Earth and the colony worlds. Human scientists had learned to bend space and time in ways that made travel across the galaxy much faster. They had also started experimenting with ways to look backward and forward through time itself. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. If the Council thought human technology was dangerous, this meeting could be a trap. But refusing their invitation might be even worse. He had heard stories about what happened to species that angered the Council. "Set course for Valthera Prime," Jake ordered. His voice was steady even though his heart was beating fast. "Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we are accepting the Council's invitation." Lisa started giving orders to the navigation crew. The ship would need to use their newest quantum drives to reach the Council's world in time. It would be a dangerous journey through parts of space that humans had never explored. Ambassador Helen Foster arrived on the bridge an hour later. She was a small woman with silver hair who had spent years learning how to talk with alien species. Her job was to make sure humans did not accidentally start wars with their words or actions. "I have been studying everything we know about Council protocols," Helen said. She carried a thick file of documents and looked very worried. "The problem is that we know almost nothing. They meet with each species differently based on how old and advanced they are." Security Chief Ryan Clark joined the group near the main display. He was a big man with scars on his hands from old battles. His job was to keep the crew safe, but he did not know how to protect them from beings that could control time and space. "How many people should we take to the meeting?" Ryan asked. He wanted to bring a full security team but knew that might seem threatening to the Council. Jake thought about this carefully. Too many people might make the Council angry. Too few might make humans look weak and unimportant. "Just the 4 of us," he decided. Helen for diplomacy, Kevin for science, Ryan for security, and me for command. The ship jumped into quantum space and began the long journey to Valthera Prime. The crew spent days preparing for the meeting. They studied what little information existed about the Council members and practiced different ways to show respect without seeming weak. Dr. Parker discovered that the Council was made up of several ancient species. The Zephyrians had existed for 50 million years and could live in almost any environment. The Nethys were made of living crystal and thought in ways that biological creatures could not understand. The Vreks were pure energy beings that claimed to be older than the galaxy itself. As they got closer to Velthara Prime, strange things began to happen. Time seemed to move differently in some parts of the ship. Colors looked brighter, and sounds seemed to come from directions that should not exist. The crew became nervous, and some reported having dreams about vast alien cities. When they finally arrived at the Council's world, Jake understood why no human had ever been invited before. Velthara Prime was not completely in normal space. Parts of it existed in different dimensions, and the whole planet seemed to shift and change as they watched it. The ship received landing instructions in a language that their computers could barely translate. Jake and his team prepared to meet beings that were older than human civilization and more powerful than anything they had ever imagined. As they walked toward the shuttle bay, Jake wondered if they would ever see Earth again. The council chambers fell silent as Elder Zefkar announced the trial of worth. Jake Morrison felt his stomach drop as the ancient being explained what this meant. Every species that wanted to keep their independence had to pass this test. The problem was that no species had ever succeeded. The trial will test your species in ways that reveal your true nature, Zefkar said. Its blue scales seemed to glow in the strange light of the chamber. You will face challenges that have been used for millions of years to determine if a species deserves freedom or needs guidance. Jake looked at the other council members. The crystal being called Quintel of the Astari was making soft musical sounds that seemed sad. Unlike the others, this being appeared to feel sorry for what was about to happen. Jake wondered if Quintel might be an ally in this place full of enemies. On Earth, the news of the trial created panic in the government buildings. President Hayes called another emergency meeting, but this time the mood was very different. Everyone knew that humanity was about to face a test that had been failed by every other species for millions of years. We need to prepare for war, General Stone said firmly. His advisors had calculated the military strength needed to fight the council. The numbers were not encouraging, but Stone believed humans could win through superior tactics and determination. Director Carlos Rivera from the Pacific Federation disagreed completely. Fighting the council would be suicide, he argued. They have technology we cannot understand and allies across the entire galaxy. Our only choice is to accept their terms and hope for mercy. Prime Minister Sophie Bennett from the European Collective tried to find a middle path. Perhaps we can negotiate different terms for the trial, she suggested. If we can understand what they are really testing, we might find a way to pass. Dr. Amanda Walsh was already working on that problem. Her team had been analyzing every piece of information about previous trials. What they found was disturbing but also gave them hope. The trial seemed designed to make species fail by testing them in ways that went against their natural strengths. Back on Velthara Prime, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He agreed to take the trial, but he also started gathering evidence of the Council's deceptions. During breaks in the formal meetings, he explored parts of the ancient city that were supposed to be forbidden to outsiders. Lisa Santos was leading a secret mission from the UES Defender. While Jake kept the Council busy with diplomatic discussions, she and a small team were trying to reach the restricted archives beneath the main city. If the stories were true, those archives contained records of every species the Council had eliminated. The team moved carefully through tunnels that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. The walls shifted and changed as they walked, making it hard to know which direction they were going. Strange symbols glowed in the darkness, and the air hummed with energy that made their skin tingle. Chloe Turner used her engineering skills to bypass the security systems protecting the archives. The technology was incredibly advanced but also very old. Like everything else on this world, it had not been updated in millions of years. Human quantum computers could find weaknesses that the designers had never imagined. When they finally reached the archive chambers, what they found was worse than anyone had expected. Thousands of files showed the history of species that had been destroyed by the Council. Each file contained detailed records of their achievements, their cultures, and their final moments. "Look at this," Dr. Parker whispered as he read through the data. The Yildan had developed medicine that could cure any disease. The Tormek had learned to create energy from nothing. All of these discoveries could have helped every species in the galaxy. Lisa felt sick as she realized the truth. The Council had not just eliminated potential threats. They had destroyed knowledge and discoveries that could have made life better for everyone. The trial was not about determining worthiness. It was about finding legal reasons to commit genocide. Meanwhile, Jake was beginning the first phase of the trial of worth. The test took place in a pocket dimension where reality could be controlled and shaped by the Council's technology. Jake found himself in a series of environments that tested different aspects of human nature. The first challenge put him in command of a space battle where he had to choose between saving his own ships or protecting civilian vessels from another species. Previous test subjects had always chosen to save their own people, which the Council interpreted as proof of selfish nature. Jake made a different choice. He ordered his ships to protect the civilians even though it meant some of his own people would die. When the simulation ended, the Council members looked confused. This was not the response they had expected from the data about human behavior. The second challenge placed Jake in a situation where he could gain unlimited power by betraying allies from other species. Again, the expected response was for the test subject to choose power over friendship. Again, Jake chose differently. He refused the power and worked to help his allies succeed instead. Back on Earth, Dr. Walsh had made a breakthrough in understanding the trial's real purpose. "They are not testing our worthiness," she announced to the Emergency Council. "They are measuring our potential threat level. Every challenge is designed to reveal our military capabilities, our technology limits, and our psychological weaknesses." This information changed everything. If the trial was really a threat assessment, then passing it might actually make things worse for humanity. A species that proved to be too capable would be eliminated immediately, rather than given a chance to submit to Council authority. President Hayes faced an impossible choice. If humans failed the trial, they would be forced to give up their independence and advanced research. If they passed the trial, they might prove that they were too dangerous to be allowed to live. Either way, human freedom was in danger. General Stone began preparing for the worst-case scenario. Military bases across human space started building defenses and calling up reserve forces. Scientists worked day and night to complete weapons research that might give humans a chance against Council technology. On Velthara Prime, Jake continued through more challenges, each one more difficult than the last. He faced moral dilemmas that had no good answers and tactical problems that seemed impossible to solve. But his human ability to think creatively and adapt quickly allowed him to find solutions that surprised the ancient Council members. Quintel of the Asthari began making quiet contact with Jake during rest periods between challenges. The crystal being was part of a small group within the Council that disagreed with the elimination policy. They had been waiting for thousands of years for a species strong enough to challenge the old ways. "Your people have something we lost long ago," Quintel sang in its musical language. "You still believe that the future can be better than the past. Most species accept their limitations and stop trying to grow. You refuse to accept any limitations at all." Jake realized that this might be humanity's real advantage. Not their technology or their military strength, but their refusal to give up hope for something better. Every other species had eventually accepted the Council's authority because they lost faith in their own potential. As the trial continued, news of Jake's unexpected success spread throughout the galaxy. Species that had been under Council rule for millions of years began to whisper about the humans who might actually pass the ancient test. For the first time in ages, some of them began to remember their own dreams of freedom and independence. The trial was becoming something the Council had never intended. Instead of proving that humans needed to be controlled, it was inspiring other species to question why they had accepted control for so long. The age of betrayal was beginning, but it might not end the way the ancient rulers expected. President Nicole Hayes sat in the emergency meeting room deep below the Earth Defense Headquarters. The walls were thick metal and the air felt heavy with worry. Around the long table sat the most important people in human space. All of them had serious faces as they discussed the message from Commander Morrison. General Marcus Stone slammed his fist on the table and made everyone jump. His gray uniform was covered with medals from battles against hostile alien raiders. "We should be preparing our fleets, not sending diplomats to bow before these ancient creatures," he said loudly. His voice echoed off the metal walls. Dr. Amanda Walsh shook her head and pushed her glasses up her nose. She was the smartest scientist on Earth and had led the teams that created human quantum technology. "Violence will only prove their point that we are dangerous," she said calmly. "Our research could help every species in the galaxy if we share it properly." The argument continued for hours while President Hayes listened to both sides. She knew that the wrong choice could mean the end of human civilization. Reports were already coming in from the outer colonies about alien ships gathering near human space. Some of the ships were bigger than anything humans had ever built. Meanwhile, on Valthera Prime, Jake Morrison walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of something that looked like crystal but felt warm to the touch. Strange music played from nowhere, and the air smelled like flowers that did not exist on Earth. Elder Zefkar of the Zephyrians floated beside Jake as they moved toward the council chambers. The alien looked like a tall human covered in blue scales, but its eyes were ancient and sad. It spoke through a device that turned its thoughts into words humans could understand. "Your species frightens us," Zefkar said honestly. "In 10,000 years you have achieved what took us 50 million years to learn. This rapid growth has never been seen before in our galaxy." Jake tried to stay calm even though his heart was racing. He had trained for many dangerous situations, but nothing had prepared him for talking with beings that were older than his entire species. "We only want to explore and learn," he said carefully. "We mean no harm to anyone." The Zephyrian made a sound that might have been laughter. "All young species say this," it replied. "But your quantum research changes the basic rules of reality. Your time experiments could destroy entire star systems if something goes wrong." Back on the UES Defender, engineer Chloe Turner was studying the technology she could see through the ship's sensors. Her computer screens showed patterns and energy readings that made no sense according to human science. But as she watched the data, she began to understand something troubling. "Captain Santos, you need to see this," Chloe called from her workstation. Her voice was excited but also worried. Lisa came over and looked at the displays showing Council technology. "Their systems are incredibly old," Chloe explained. "Some of these energy patterns have not changed in millions of years. They have the same technology they had when humans were still living in caves. They have stopped trying to improve or discover new things." Lisa stared at the data and felt a chill run down her spine. An advanced civilization that refused to grow or change was more dangerous than any enemy fleet. "They are afraid of progress," she said quietly. "They want to keep things exactly the same forever." Dr. Kevin Parker was in the Council archives with permission to study their historical records. What he found there made him sick to his stomach. File after file showed species that had been eliminated by the Council over millions of years. The reasons were always the same. Too much growth, too much change, too much danger to galactic stability. The records showed 17 different species that had been completely destroyed. Each one had been developing new technologies that the Council considered threatening. Each one had been wiped out before they could share their discoveries with other races. One file showed a species called the Morthani, who had learned to travel between galaxies. Another described the Veltar, who had discovered how to create new forms of life. All of them were gone now, erased from existence by the Council's ancient weapons. Kevin realized that humans were not the first species to face this choice. They were just the latest in a long line of civilizations that had grown too fast and learned too much. The Council had been doing this for so long that they believed it was the only way to keep peace in the galaxy. On Earth, the debate was getting more heated. General Stone had support from the military colonies who wanted to fight rather than surrender. Dr. Walsh had backing from the research stations who believed science could solve any problem. President Hayes knew she had to make a decision soon. "What if we offered to limit our research?" suggested Director Carlos Rivera from the Pacific Federation. He was a careful man who always tried to find safe solutions. "We could promise to only develop technology that the Council approves." "That would be the end of human progress," Dr. Walsh replied angrily. "We would become like every other species under Council rule, stuck in the past and afraid to dream of the future." Back in the Council chambers, Jake was meeting the other members of the ancient government. The Nethys representative was a creature made of living crystal that spoke by changing colors. The Vrex delegate was pure energy that had taken a roughly human shape to make communication easier. Each being was impossibly old and had seen civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy. They spoke about species the way humans might talk about insects. Temporary, unimportant, and easily replaced if they became troublesome. "You must understand our position," the Vrex energy being said. Its voice sounded like wind through metal. "We have maintained peace for millions of years by preventing dangerous developments. Your quantum technology could inspire other young species to attempt similar research. Jake felt anger building inside him, but forced himself to stay calm. You have maintained control, not peace, he said firmly. Peace comes from cooperation and understanding, not from fear and threats. The council members looked at each other in ways that humans could not fully understand. Some seemed surprised by Jake's words, while others appeared angry. It was clear that no one had ever spoken to them this way before. As the meeting continued, Jake began to understand the real problem. The council had become so powerful and lived for so long that they could not imagine any other way of doing things. They genuinely believed that their control was necessary to prevent chaos and destruction, but Jake also saw fear in their ancient eyes. Fear that humanity's rapid progress would inspire other species to question the council's authority. Fear that the carefully maintained order of millions of years might finally come to an end. The age of betrayal was about to begin, and no one yet knew which side would survive. Jake Morrison's continued success in the Trial of Worth was causing chaos within the Council of Eternity. Ancient beings who had not disagreed about anything in millions of years were now arguing loudly in their strange languages. The trial was supposed to be impossible to pass, but Jake kept finding solutions that no one had ever imagined. The Vrex collective leader, an energy being called Morthul, finally revealed the truth that had been hidden for ages. This council was never meant to be permanent, it admitted during a private meeting with Jake. Its voice sounded like electricity crackling through metal. We were supposed to guide young species until they could govern themselves, then dissolve and let them take over. Jake felt anger building inside him as he understood what this meant. But you became addicted to power, he said. You kept control long after you should have given it up. How many species could have joined you as equals instead of being destroyed? Morthul's energy form flickered with what might have been shame. The original charter has been hidden for 50 million years, it replied. Only the oldest members remember the true purpose of our organization. We convinced ourselves that we were protecting the galaxy, but we were really protecting our own authority. While this revelation was happening, Lisa Santos and her team had found something incredible in the archives. Hidden behind layers of security was the Council's original charter, the document that explained their real purpose. Dr. Parker read through it with growing excitement and horror. According to this, any species that reaches certain technological and social milestones automatically qualifies for Council membership, he whispered. They are supposed to become partners, not subjects. Humanity has not only reached these milestones, but exceeded them in almost every category. Lisa realized the enormous implications of this discovery. We should not be taking orders from the Council, she said quietly. We should be joining them as equals. They have been lying to us and everyone else for millions of years. Back on Earth, the resistance movement was growing stronger every day. Colonel Beth Martinez had taken command of secret military preparations, while Dr. Ian Foster led teams of scientists working on countermeasures against Council technology. They had discovered that human quantum innovations could disrupt the Council's control systems in unexpected ways. If we can break their technological control over other species, we might be able to free the entire galaxy, Dr. Foster explained to his research team. Every species under Council rule has been forced to limit their development. Imagine what they could achieve if they were free to grow again. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not just fighting for their own freedom, but for the liberation of countless other civilizations. Species that had been oppressed for millions of years might finally have a chance to reach their full potential. On Velthara Prime, the Council was splitting into factions for the first time in recorded history. Quintel of the Asthari had gathered support from some younger Zephyrians and a few other species that remembered the original purpose of their organization. They believed that Jake's success proved humanity deserved to join the Council rather than be eliminated. The traditionalist faction led by Morthul and Elder Nethys Prime Zarquan argued for immediate action against the human threat. Their success in the trial only proves how dangerous they are, Zarquan communicated through crystal resonances that hurt human ears. We must eliminate them before they inspire others to rebel. The debate revealed the Council's greatest weakness. Their decision-making process had been designed for stability and consensus among species that thought in terms of geological time periods. They could not make quick decisions or adapt to rapidly changing situations. This had worked when they faced primitive species, but humans moved and thought too fast for their ancient, Systems Jake faced the final challenge of the trial of worth in a specially created dimension where he had to demonstrate leadership under impossible conditions. The test presented him with a simulated galactic catastrophe where he could save either humanity or the council members, but not both. Every other species that had taken this test had chosen to save their own people. The council interpreted this as proof that no species could be trusted with real power because they would always put their own interests first. This selfish choice justified keeping all species under council control. Jake studied the situation carefully and realized that the test itself was flawed. It assumed that leadership meant making impossible choices between different groups. But true leadership meant finding solutions that saved everyone, even when those solutions seemed impossible. He spent hours analyzing the simulated disaster and the resources available to deal with it. Using human creativity and the quantum technologies that scared the council so much, Jake found a way to save both humanity and the council members. His solution required cooperation between species and sharing of advanced technologies. When the simulation ended, the council chambers fell completely silent. No test subject had ever chosen to save their supposed enemies along with their own people. No one had ever found a solution that protected everyone involved. Jake's choice demonstrated exactly what the council feared most about humanity. "You see why we consider your species dangerous," Elder Zefkar said sadly. "Your inclusive philosophy threatens everything we have built. If other species learn to think like you do, they will no longer accept our authority." Jake realized that this was the real issue. The council was not afraid of human weapons or technology. They were terrified of human ideas about cooperation, equality, and unlimited potential. These ideas could spread to other species and destroy the carefully maintained hierarchy that kept the council in power. The trial results should have qualified humanity for immediate council membership, but the traditionalist faction refused to honor the outcome. Morthul and its allies activated emergency protocols that had not been used for millions of years. Ancient weapon systems hidden throughout the galaxy began targeting human colonies and Earth itself. "The age of betrayal begins now," Morthul announced to the assembled council. "We will not allow this young species to destroy what we have protected for so long. Every human world will be eliminated before they can corrupt other civilizations with their dangerous ideas." Jake watched in horror as displays showed council fleets moving toward human space. The beings he had tried to work with diplomatically were now revealing their true nature. They had never intended to let humanity survive as an independent species. The trial had been nothing more than a way to study human capabilities before the final attack. But Jake's success in the trial had already inspired changes across the galaxy. Species that had been passive for millions of years were beginning to question their own subjugation. The Karani, who had been enslaved for 12,000 years, were rising in revolt. The aquatic Morhai were emerging from their homeworld for the first time in ages to join the growing rebellion. Lisa Santos received an emergency message from Jake just as council attack fleets arrived at Valthera Prime. The UES Defender had to escape immediately, with the evidence of council crimes, and the original charter that proved their authority was illegal. Her ship became the center of a desperate running battle through the strange dimensions around the council world. As the Defender fought its way to safety, Captain Santos realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer fighting just for survival. They had become the spark that could ignite a galaxy-wide revolution against an oppressive system that had lasted for millions of years. The ancient Council of Eternity had finally met a species that refused to accept limitations on their potential. The war that followed would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the future of every intelligent species in the galaxy. The age of betrayal had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The age of betrayal had begun with fire and destruction across human space. Ancient council weapons emerged from hidden locations throughout the galaxy, targeting Earth and every human colony. The attack was swift and merciless, but humanity had been preparing for this moment since Jake Morrison first entered the council chambers. Captain Lisa Santos fought desperately to escape Valthera Prime, as the UES Defender was pursued by ships older than human civilization. The evidence she carried was more valuable than any weapon. The original council charter and records of their crimes could unite every oppressed species in the galaxy against their ancient rulers. All ships. This is Captain Santos. She broadcast on emergency frequencies as her ship jumped into quantum space. The Council has declared war on humanity, but we have proof of their illegal authority. Any species that wants freedom should rally to these coordinates. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ships from dozens of different species began appearing around the Defender. The Karani brought their fast attack vessels. The aquatic Morhai emerged from deep space in ships that looked like living creatures. Even some younger Zephyrians had broken away from the Council to join the rebellion. On Earth, General Marcus Stone's preparations proved to be exactly what humanity needed. Military bases across human space had been building defenses and weapons specifically designed to fight Council technology. The quantum disruptors developed by Dr. Amanda Walsh could interfere with the ancient control systems that the Council used to maintain their power. Remember, we are not just fighting for ourselves, Stone announced to the assembled fleet commanders. Every shot we fire is for species that have been oppressed for millions of years. Every victory brings the galaxy closer to true freedom. The first major battle took place near the human colony of New Geneva. Council attack fleets expected an easy victory against primitive human defenses, but they found something completely different. Human ships used quantum tunneling to appear and disappear randomly, making them almost impossible to target. Their weapons could disrupt Council technology in ways that had never been seen before. More importantly, humanity was not fighting alone. Ships from liberated species fought alongside human vessels, each contributing their own unique advantages. The Karani provided speed and agility. The Morhai brought biological technologies that could adapt and evolve during battle. The rebel Zephyrians shared knowledge of Council weaknesses accumulated over millions of years. Dr. Ian Foster made the breakthrough that changed everything. His research team discovered that human quantum technology could not only disrupt Council systems, but could also restore technologies that the Council had forced other species to abandon. Worlds that had been dependent on Council infrastructure for ages began reclaiming their independence. We are not conquering the galaxy, Dr. Foster explained to the resistance leaders. We are liberating it. Every species we free becomes stronger and more capable than they have been for millions of years. Jake Morrison had been trapped on Valthara Prime when the fighting began, but he was not idle. Working with Quintel and other Council members who opposed the traditionalist faction, he began sabotaging the ancient weapon systems from within. The Council's greatest strength was also their weakness. Their technology was so old and interconnected that damaging key systems could cripple their entire war effort. The rebellion grew stronger with every passing day. Species that had been passive for geological ages suddenly remembered what it felt like to have hope for the future. The Council's control had been based on the belief that resistance was impossible, but humanity had proven that even the most ancient tyranny could be challenged. The climactic battle took place not in space but in the Council chambers themselves. Jake Morrison led a coalition of rebels from multiple species in a final assault on the heart of the ancient government. The fight was both physical and philosophical, as the old guard tried to maintain their authority through force, while the rebels argued for a new way of governing the galaxy. You do not understand what you are destroying, Elder Zefkar pleaded as Council defenses crumbled around them. We have maintained peace for 50 million years. Without our guidance, the galaxy will descend into chaos and war. Jake looked at the ancient being with pity rather than anger. You have maintained control, not peace, he replied. True peace comes from cooperation between equals, not submission to authority. You had your chance to evolve and grow, but you chose stagnation instead. The final confrontation was with Morthul, the energy being that had led the traditionalist faction. It tried to activate a weapon that could destroy entire star systems, but human quantum technology interfered with the ancient controls. The weapon turned on itself and destroyed the last of the Council's secret installations. As the fighting ended, Jake stood in the ruined Council chamber surrounded by representatives from dozens of species that had been freed from millions of years of oppression. The ancient government that had ruled the galaxy for longer than most civilizations had existed was finally coming to an end. What happens now? Asked Quintel. The crystal being had helped humanity throughout the rebellion and wanted to make sure the new government would be better than the old one. Jake thought carefully before answering. We build something new, he said. Not a council that rules from above, but a commonwealth where every species has an equal voice. No one group will have the power to control or eliminate others. The Galactic Commonwealth was established with Jake Morrison as its first Director General. His job was not to rule but to help coordinate cooperation between species that were learning to work together as equals. The new government had strict rules preventing any single group from gaining too much power. The transformation was remarkable. Species that had been forced to limit their development for millions of years suddenly exploded with creativity and innovation. Technologies that had been forbidden were shared freely. Art, music, and literature flourished as different cultures began to exchange ideas without fear. The former council worlds became centers of learning and research rather than seats of power. The ancient archives were open to all species, allowing them to learn about civilizations that had been destroyed and knowledge that had been suppressed. Some of the eliminated species had left behind technologies that could benefit everyone. Humanity's role in the Commonwealth was not as rulers, but as catalysts for change. Human diplomats helped resolve conflicts between species that had never learned to work together. Human scientists shared quantum technologies that allowed faster communication and travel. Human artists and philosophers spread ideas about individual potential and unlimited growth. Years later, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Commonwealth headquarters and watched ships from hundreds of different species working together on projects that would have been impossible under council rule. They were exploring beyond the galaxy, creating new forms of life and solving problems that had plagued civilizations for millions of years. "Do you ever regret what we did?" Lisa Santos asked as she joined him at the window. She had become the Commonwealth's Director of Exploration, leading missions to find other galaxies that might need liberation. Jake thought about all the species that had been destroyed by the Council, and all the knowledge that had been lost forever. "I regret that we could not save the ones who came before us," he said. "But I am proud that we saved the ones who came after." The age of betrayal had ended not with humanity's domination, but with their greatest achievement. They had proven that intelligence and courage were more important than age and power. They had shown that the future could always be better than the past if people were willing to work for change. The galaxy was now free to grow and evolve in ways that had been impossible for millions of years. New species were being discovered and welcomed as equals. Technologies that had been forbidden were creating wonders beyond imagination. The Council of Eternity was remembered not as humanity's enemy, but as the final obstacle that had to be overcome before true civilization could begin. Jake watched the ships of the Commonwealth heading toward distant stars. He knew that humanity's real journey was just beginning. They had liberated one galaxy, but there were billions more waiting to be explored. The universe was vast and full of possibilities, and for the first time in millions of years, every species was free to pursue those possibilities without fear or limitation.